Good evening again, and good morning to the audience and our speakers for the 5th Transatlantic AI Exchange web session. Today is October 26, 2021. I'm Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, longtime entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley for over 30 years now, and working at Intel's headquarters in Santa Clara around topics related to artificial intelligence and the data center of the future. In fact, today, I'm joining our session from my hometown in Germany. We are again super excited bringing together high-tech experts and connecting them with the up-and-coming German AI ecosystem. Before we begin, allow me to provide a quick overview of this Transatlantic AI Exchange initiative. The Transatlantic AI Exchange is a platform that aims at accelerating and expanding the transatlantic knowledge exchange in the human-to-machine economy, the so-called fourth industrial revolution. We foster exchanges on AI and create the grounds for entrepreneurs, for researchers, for universities, also for investors, but also for German Mittelstand, the SMBs, and policymakers to build long-term partnerships. A big thank you to our founding members, Petra Ragner and the team, as well as Oliver from AI Hamburg, who joined me in this journey very early on. First, we couldn't do this without sponsors. Therefore, I'd like to thank our platinum sponsor, Taylor Wessing, and our gold sponsor, the German consulate in San Francisco. We have already secured the next event for December 7. A potential new one for middle of November is in the making, and we are excited about the topics and the experts supporting our program. For more details and to secure a slot, feel free to sign up right after today's event. Now, for 2022, we will focus even further on use cases and opportunities around healthcare, but also topics like climate change and sustainability, Industry 4.0, trusted AI, autonomous driving, just to name a few. If you believe our event is of value to you and your network, we greatly appreciate to share and like us on our LinkedIn page. If anyone on the call has transatlantic or AI-related topics of any sort, please reach out to us and we will consider building them into our program for 2022. We really like to hear from all of you to offer the most relevant programs possible. So if you look at the screen, just scan this QR code with your mobile phone, or you can participate online. The URL will be posted in a few seconds here in the chat during the session. By the way, it will not interrupt the Zoom session. It can actually work in parallel. At the end of the 60-minute session, we will provide a new Zoom link in the chat channel to open up an additional 30-minute Q&A networking opportunity for all people who are interested. So let's get to it. I would like to introduce today's speakers who offer a rare glimpse and personal advice that has helped many companies to thrive in an industry where innovation needs to outpace market changes and customer needs. Now, solving real-life problems and ensuring customer success are North Stars a company should thrive for. Let's talk about the creation of value. Before asking Mark and Richard to say a few words about themselves, a brief overview about these two incredible individuals that I'm honored to have known for quite a long time. Mark, just to give him a lot of information in your background, Mark was Vice President, Finance, Business Unit, CFO at Dell, Senior Vice President, CFO, Logitech, Executive Vice President, CFO, Autodesk, and President and CFO Emeritus at Salesforce. I'd like to point out that Mark just a few weeks ago received the 2021 Hall of Fame Lifetime Achievements Awards for his accomplishments as CFO. Pretty incredible. Mark is also a passionate marathon runner, but most importantly, he's an incredible, humbled person who has a really unique talent to connect with people and is always available to listen and provide very valuable advice. Personally, I am a living proof of that. Richard Sucher is no stranger to the German innovation and AI ecosystem and has been covered in the media many times. Searching Richard on the website and on Wikipedia gives anyone on this call a rich summary of the accomplishments he and his knowledge and passion about artificial intelligence. He was founder, CEO of DataMind that was acquired by Salesforce. He then was at Salesforce Chief Data Scientist and now is a founder of you.com. Hopefully in a few minutes, he can share a little bit more if he's willing to do so. He invested in a dozen of investments with his own VC fund. And I think he's still active or semi-active as a professor at Stanford, and more to that from him later on. So maybe he can also share more about his passion, about hobbies, which I thought is pretty incredible. Very unusual hobbies, but pretty amazing. So, Mark, welcome to the sixth TIKE session. TIKE stands for Transatlantic AI Exchange. Would you please add a few personal comments about you as a person and how you approach your life and business in general? Welcome,
well,
Mark.
First of all, thank you very much, Thomas, for the very kind introduction. It's such an honor to be here. I just applaud what you're doing and your vision for this transatlantic AI exchange. I always, feel like better, never done. We can all keep learning. We can all keep leaning forward. It's all the excitement is about the future. Success is never final for any organization. And so thank you for organizing this and kindly inviting me to be a part of this. I have had the great pleasure to be in technology for 40 years. I joined when I was 22 in a small company at the time called Hewlett-Packard. It's been quite a journey ever since, including some of the commentary that Thomas had referenced. But I'm really quite honored to also be on video stage here with Richard Socher, a friend, just an incredible person who is really changing the world. And it's been so fun to get to know Richard. And I'm really looking forward to this exchange because, Thomas, as you and I've talked about, and Richard, we share the passion of startups. We share the passion of dreaming big, thinking big, impacting big. And I can't think of another person better to be on stage than with Richard, Thomas, and you moderating us. So thank you for that. And back to you, Thomas.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. So Richard, also as well, welcome to the sixth TIKE session. Would you also please add a few personal comments about how you approach your life and business in general before we tackle a few interesting questions, please?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I want to second Mark's words. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Very honored to be on the stage with Mark. He is one of two really great Marks at Salesforce. I'm sure there are many more that I don't know as well. But yeah, Mark Benioff and Mark Hawkins. There's some amazing people to work with back at Salesforce, where I was chief scientist. I'm not anymore teaching, so the startup life has grabbed me fully, and some investing on the side. Generally, I try to, in terms of an approach, always think about what's the highest impact thing that I could be doing with the current skill set that I have, energy and excitement, and opportunities that presented themselves or maybe weren't there, but I worked towards getting them and sometimes got lucky in certain moments to be able to have them. And so that has led me right now to work on you.com, a new search engine. I think the time is right for building much more open search engine platform, and we can go over that a little bit later. But yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome, appreciate it. So maybe we start with an opening question to Mark. Obviously, he has been and is still with Salesforce. So overall, there's an incredible entrepreneur we have. There's Mark with this incredible bio that he has. Maybe the first question, how does Salesforce look into innovation? I know you guys have business ventures, you have a VC fund, you do M&As. I mean, people may or may not know, but one of your biggest deals probably has been Slack, the acquisition of Slack. And then you have other investments super early on. I learned a few months back that even Zoom was something you invested super early on. So it's like all over the place. And yes, it seems to be hitting a sweet spot in general. So how And can you give us some example? How does Salesforce, this giant big company, looks into innovation with all the facets that you have available?
Well, I'd love to share maybe opening. I'd love to hear Richard's comment as our chief data scientist and somebody deeply understanding our innovation cycle. But let me just comment with a few things to frame this. I think the way we have really perpetuated innovation is we have to step back and look at our values. And I have long talked to the capital markets, to the public markets, that values drive value. And when I say values drive value, I think about our values are 4 values, and they're the North Star of our company. It starts with trust. Trust is our #1 value. Innovation, customer success, and equality. Well, Thomas, that's the beginning of really getting centered on innovation.
Yeah.
Because from my standpoint, the way we think about innovation is we center innovation, but that's not enough. It has to be innovation with a purpose to make the customer successful. And that is the next big linchpin. And when that happens, then there's economic success. So there's innovation success, there's customer success, and then there's an economic success, which creates the flywheel of momentum to do more innovation and more customer success and to get that virtuous cycle going. So that's the first thing that I would like to say is the North Star is our values. Values drive value. The second thing I would say is in our culture, we literally, we are so focused. When I say customer success, I want you to imagine today, now we're a lot bigger, we're 72,000 people plus. Every single person in our company, every single person, the receptionist, the payroll clerk, engineering, sales, everybody has to be able to do the corporate presentation and be certified on it to understand our story, to understand our values, to understand the customer is the center of everything. And that's one way we perpetuate this innovation culture. I think we do crowdsourcing, and Richard can speak much more as an incredibly impactful leader in our product development strategy. We get ideas from customers. When we buy companies, we go around the world and try to understand what's most important to customers. And we'll either do it organically or inorganically, but we'll do it with a driven purpose to take care of the customer. And that's, I give you some great stories about, M&A we've done and why, and the feedback we've got. Ventures, Thomas, as you pointed out, we have a venture fund that really we've talked about either we're going to satisfy something or we want our ecosystem to satisfy it. So we'll invest in the ecosystem to make sure our customers have a range of capabilities. And by the way, in those venture funds, which you've called out some very keen things like Snowflake or Zoom or whatever, we're at the early onset of changes with entrepreneurs in a fast-moving market with the collision of ideas. So the venture fund is not just about a return on investment. Of course it is. It's really about the speed of understanding. It's about the collision of ideas where creativity comes. And Richard could speak to that because that's where we first crossed paths. And so let me, I could talk to you about how we budget where innovation is at the top. But at the end of the day, I think we really, really need to make sure that we're thinking about this globally. And by the way, we have a $225 million startup fund in Europe, and we could go on and on. But these are some of the things I think about to be innovative. We have embraced great entrepreneurs like Richard who know speed, they know agility, they know pivoting, they know how to be scrappy, they know how to adjust, they know how to succeed, they know how to sit in the risk frontier in a very unique way. And that's pretty awesome. So I'll just stop at that.
Well, Mark, thank you. You just threw a lot of things over to Richard that he probably can respond to. And I'm inviting Richard to do that. But in addition to that, and Richard, feel free to do that, I also want to add a question about you as a German entrepreneur went through the cycle of starting a company, a German company, and then you got actually literally through the cycle successfully acquired by Salesforce. So if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more from your point of view, what you went through, what do you want to share with this audience, and then respond, and integrate some of the things that Mark just mentioned, that would be great.
Yeah. The startup ecosystem in Silicon Valley, maybe on a high level, is fascinating, right? It starts with some really great universities. Often at Stanford, it certainly did for me. Did my PhD there. Then there are incredible venture capitalists, which unfortunately are translated into Risikokapitalgeber in German, which is just giving capital to risk, which doesn't sound very good. But venture capital is like you actually going out on a venture, giving capital to create something, a novel, go on an adventure too, which venture often is. And so that is part of the ecosystem that I was happy to sort of just breathe in during my PhD, during which I mostly wanted to become a professor, actually. But then it was clear that AI was at this inflection point where we've made a lot of progress on the research side, but now you could have even more impact on the application side. And it was also clear at the time that not enough companies had access yet to this AI. There weren't as many open source projects and so on. And so we thought it was the right time to build a platform. But then the big part of the startup ecosystem is also companies that are as future focused and able to move quickly. And Salesforce certainly has been one of those for many, many years, and still is and continues to be, because they both have organic innovation, of which I was a big part of for several years, but also acquire companies and hence can leapfrog on incredible innovation aspects, and AI, also others, and that I think is kind of concludes the startup ecosystem and the life cycle. And I was very fortunate to be able to go through that life cycle. I think as a German entrepreneur, I sometimes do wonder, could I have done what I did in Silicon Valley in Germany? And I think there's a certain trust that large companies have in amazing founders to be able to take their technology and help them really scale it and have more impact. And that certainly was something I felt very strongly at Salesforce. There's a lot of trust, and you want to work really hard and give back that trust and make it true, what they saw in you. And so you basically are able to take, in our case, specific horizontal AI platform and apply it to many different use cases inside a bigger company. And unfortunately, I do often question whether I could have done all of those things that I've done in Silicon Valley. In Germany, I think large companies in Germany have very much a not invented here mentality. If they didn't invent it, they don't quite get as excited about new technologies as people in the US do. When they see the impact something can have, they make bets and help the whole ecosystem and help themselves, of course, in speeding up their growth. And so there are some questions there. And then, of course, early on in the research side, you also have to have a lot of professors who are willing to say, all right, I don't even know about this field yet. In my case, it was natural language processing at the intersection of neural networks. There had maybe been 2 or 3 relevant papers in the decade before I started in that field. And then maybe like 3 decades, 4 decades before, there had been even more. But that is something that you have to have, that spirit of innovation and that value of innovation too. And then, of course, at some point, personally for me, I also thought, okay, what is the absolute highest impact thing I could be doing right now with artificial intelligence, with natural language processing, and also looking at the world, looking at democracy, looking at the information diets we all have, and seeing that the entire economy is moving online, and you currently have a single gatekeeper with Google that mostly wants to sell you, the user, to the highest bidding advertiser. And now doesn't even forward that traffic in the majority of cases anymore. Over 2/3 of all Google searches are now 0 clicks, meaning they don't go anywhere outside of Google. They stay within the Google ecosystem. And so when you combine the entire economy moving online and that first gatekeeper not forwarding that traffic anymore to the rest, and every other company having to pay this massive tax to be able to participate in the economy, that's clearly not a very fair system. There's a bit of a monopoly there and various types of behaviors like that. So I think it's time for us to fix that and start a movement to take back the internet. And that actually started, a lot of that thinking started also with the values that I learned about at Salesforce. And I'll just, maybe conclude, our values also start with trust. Our number one value at you.com is also trust. And then it's facts and kindness, which I think we need both more of on the internet.
Okay, so let me tap into that a little bit more because that's of interest. If you look at you.com, do you believe you could have started you.com from Germany, out of Germany?
It's also tricky. It's non-trivial to beat a large monopoly, a $1 trillion plus company of Google. So you do need quite a large amount of capital. I think the startup ecosystem in Germany is increasing now, and we've made some investments also in German startups, but it's very hard still to raise that much money, as much money as we needed to even get this off the ground, let alone like really grow it and scale it. And so there would have been a tricky moment there. There's some complexity also with some of the regulation. I do generally believe in GDPR, but if you're, a 5-10 person company in the very early days, it's hard to fulfill all of those requirements from the get-go when you don't even have your full product yet fleshed out, but you have to work a lot on the back end. I do generally believe that this is the right thing to do in terms of GDPR. We actually do care a lot about privacy, but there's a difference between wanting to do it and doing it because it's the right thing, and then also having to maybe check off like 50 extra boxes that maybe some of which are just bureaucratic and don't actually add that much to privacy. And then, so I think those are the two big ones. And then, of course, there's kind of the tricky bit also of the language barrier inside Europe to have a single large economy. And if you have to focus and you focus, one way of focusing is just on one language and one region at first. It's easier if that is English and that market is large enough. So I think, and I'm excited about the future of automated natural language processing and translation, so that you're able to launch a company in Europe and then have it be more and more automated in terms of translation, and then also having more unification of various laws so that you have a single legal system that to at least a large degree allows a company to quickly expand within Europe.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Maybe, Mark, anything to add? Otherwise, I'm happy to move to the next question.
No, it was actually a great dialogue, and I really enjoyed the notion that Richard had put forward. I think a couple things struck me when he was talking. First of all, when a company leans into, let's say, buying a company because you're trying to move fast, either organic or inorganic innovation, sometimes you get really fortunate and you meet somebody like Richard, and it's a really good, thing that comes together, and it's super successful for all involved. But the other thing that Richard's talking about in the mindset of going fast and learning and being customer focused, in addition for innovation, being, very, having those two together, is sometimes you have to get on the risk frontier where something doesn't work. But that, I want to just share a story here that I think might be interesting, because we've talked about publicly in the past about, we've done many M&A, and we've been very fortunate, really, really good track record. But we did one M&A and it didn't achieve our goals. It was called Buddy Media. It was a really interesting company, but the world was changing so fast that by the time that actually came together, the world, was starting to blow by it. I mean, literally that fast. But, it didn't achieve all of its goals, but it did something for us. So you could look at it and say, hey, it didn't achieve all the goals. But Buddy Media was in the marketing area. Marketing, we call it our marketing cloud, and how to market in a whole different way. And what we learned is, even though that didn't achieve all the goals, it opened our mind and our consciousness to a whole nother part of our strategy. And so that began to raise the opportunity to buy a company called ExactTarget that was wildly successful and was the underpinning of our marketing cloud. Well, the reason that's important is we began to be able to pull together a vision of our sales cloud, our service cloud, our marketing cloud, our demand e-commerce cloud, data integration with AI, and now with Slack, improving every one of them. And now we have a 360-degree view for our customer that is very, very, very strong, in part because of some of the great things that Richard did. But the point that I'm making to you is that the way I see entrepreneurs think about it is that they're willing to have that one that didn't quite work the way they hoped completely. You got benefit from it, but not completely, because the world's moving so fast, because you're aiming at something much, much bigger. And I think that is something that I think is really powerful that I've learned about the cycle of innovation. It's kind of like if you have your own development internally. Every single internally developed product is not a hit. That doesn't mean you don't develop internally. you try to continue to ride the risk frontier and make sure you're leaning into it. So when Richard was talking about mindset and how to think about it, I think that's really powerful. The second thing I was just musing as I was thinking about Richard and innovation and what he was sharing with you. I told you at the onset, I've been in the business for 40 years. There's only one company that I've worked for in 40 years that existed when I graduated from college. That is the economic construction and flywheel and perpetual virtual economic creation of companies like Dell, of companies like Logitech, of companies like Autodesk, of companies like Salesforce that did not even exist. And so my point there is, again, it's having the willingness to, I love Richard's vision of take back the internet. Big thinkers, big impact, big dreamers, and willing to go work hard to make something happen. So these are just reactions, Richard. I don't know any of your thoughts or Thomas, but it just kind of caught me listening to his dialogue.
I have to say, it just goes through my mind what you just said, that with the next phase of AI, we had the internet, we had social media, we had the public cloud, now we have AI and all the enablement of it. And it just hit me when you said that at the beginning of your career, one of the most established global companies didn't even exist. I mean, let's really internalize that, which really could mean that we are sitting here today. We have entrepreneurs in this call. There are entrepreneurs out there betting on AI and enabling the next big thing, that literally within the next 10, 20 years, these particular entrepreneurs we are trying to ignite here could be the next, Dell, Autodesk, Logitech, Salesforce, whatsoever. I mean, that's pretty amazing. That's really encouraging, and hopefully the surrounding environment, ecosystem, venture capital, mindset, culture will all support this kind of nurturing of the next big company to be, which we don't know who it is. So awesome. Thank you very much. It also kind of sums up the topic, which is, if you create value in general, if you solve a problem that is in existence out there, you actually have something to build very big in 10 years or even less, like Richard did it, sold it to Salesforce. So thank you very much. Let's maybe move to the next question. Do you both see valuable patterns amongst leading companies how to reposition themselves to adapt to market changes and customer needs? And if so, what could a startup company take away from it as an opportunity? Mark, Richard, feel free.
In terms of leading companies, I think, Mark, you have more experience.
Yeah, let me throw out some things that might surprise you. When Dell started, Michael was starting a computer services company. He learned the opportunity to create a hardware company that is the biggest computer company in the world today. When Daniel Burrell started Logitech, he was starting a software company and worked with Doug Engelbert, and they discovered the mouse. And they created a hardware company. And my point to you for, repositioning and, driving success as a startup, I agree with you, Thomas. I'm so optimistic about the future. There is so much opportunity for those that do the following. They remember values drive value, innovation, but purposeful innovation, like you said, to solve a customer problem. Customer success in a real way drives economic success, and which drives more innovation. And so and Richard's heard me say this, I wanted people in the company to know me as the customer success CFO. Because I said, if you take care of the customer, good things will come. But let's do first things first. And that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what startups do, is the first thing that I would say. The other thing I would say is you position for the future. And when you're trying to decide what to do, ask yourself if you've ever been in a meeting where there's a debate. Well, I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do that. Well, guess what we think? You should go talk to the customer. You should prioritize what the customer wants. And that cuts through everything. Everybody goes faster. Everybody's purpose driven. And I think that is my best word of advice is if you're ever wondering how you're doing and you want to be better, spend more time with the customer. And by the way, if you don't like your revenue growth rate, I've always said, go back and look at your innovation. And you might have great innovation, but is it solving a problem that's making a customer successful? Because those two are a direct correlation to your ability to scale and grow and start up. And don't hesitate to pivot like the many great founders I've mentioned will do. Let me just say the third thing. And I'd love to hear Richard's view because he's going to be a force in the world, continue to be a force in the world on this side. I told you I've been for 40 years in tech. And some people say, oh God, to really have fun in tech, you needed to join 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We're at the beginning of the beginning. We're literally at the beginning of the beginning for great entrepreneurs who can solve problems that are not solved yet in the world. And when I just use one example of the world's getting more digital, the economy is getting more digital, countries are getting more digital, companies are getting more digital, families are getting more digital. Just look at the fintech world, and we have a great customer we're working with SumUp to make them successful in Germany and supporting their success. But the opportunity is bigger than I've ever seen for people like Richard who have a vision and a dream and are willing to work hard toward it. But Richard, I'd love to turn it over to you because you see it from so many lenses. But as a word of encouragement to an incredibly talented group of people on this call, it's the beginning in my mind. I really believe that. Richard?
I couldn't agree more. I think right now is indeed a massive opportunity. It's actually, in some ways, it's never been easier to start a new company. There's a lot of infrastructure there. In a little more than a year, we've built what a lot of our customers see as a better alternative to Google. A lot of people would have thought that's impossible to do. It's completely out of the question. But thanks to AI, you can now leapfrog certain things like understanding natural language queries that you might put into a search engine and get there much, much more quickly than ever before. I think in the very beginning, you have to balance your vision and you have with what customers are saying. There is kind of the famous saying early on of Ford, like if I had asked my customers what they want, they would have said faster horses. So the very beginning, similar with Salesforce, where Mark saw the internet is going to be the driving force, we're going to do software in the cloud. And as soon as you feel like you have an inkling of a new idea being right and being the better overall strategy, then for the rest of the entire existence of your company is exactly what Mark just said, which is talk to your customers. And so, of course, at u.com too, we have a ton of interviews every week with customers. We onboard, sort of call it white glove onboarding, a lot of users every week. Of course, that doesn't scale. We also now mostly do it automatically, but it's very important to talk to at least a dozen users every week. And then there's actually a new interesting thing, which is I think more specific to consumer companies. Trust is our number one value. A big way that trust comes in is privacy. And there are actually some cases where we are slowed down because of our value of privacy. And I've seen this at Salesforce too, right? Like the customer's data is owned by the customer. We can't just train an AI on all of their data at Salesforce to improve the whole ecosystem. We have to do it in a way that every customer's data set is completely separated out and doesn't impact another customer's behavior or the soft behavior of their software. And so in our case, we care at U.com, we also care a lot about privacy. And so there's certain things that take us a lot longer because we can't just take all the data we have and connect it to a bunch of external data sets and then try to personalize the experience from the first half hour of the customer experience and journey with us. And so we also have an incognito mode where we don't store anything at all. No query gets stored. And this is something that you don't see in any other search engine out there. So we have unparalleled privacy. And also we realized there are places and times where users actually mostly want convenience. So you might look for something that is very embarrassing on your search engine. You want to be in incognito mode. You don't want some weird ads follow you around the internet afterwards, like what you would observe if you use Google. But at the same time, if you search for something like best Thai food restaurant near me, you want that search engine to know where you are. So we have to look at the location data and then actually work with partners who have lists of restaurants in that location and share that. And so having the value basically of trust, but also of facts and kindness basically led us to the innovation of having an incognito mode that's very easy to switch between. You can be hardcore private and you can have all the convenience. And the truth is that for a lot of types of searches, people want to be able to make that quick switch. And once they realize, wow, U.com actually enables me to do that, they care about my choice of privacy, then it resonates a lot with users. So yeah, this is just one reflection on what Mark said.
Well, one, if I may, Thomas, just add on, one comment there. What Richard's describing, in choices and, interacting in a pragmatic and friendly and kind way. I love your values, by the way, Richard. It doesn't surprise me at all, knowing you. But he's describing something that I think is super important. And it's not just when you think about spending time with the customer, which, by the way, Thomas, back to your question of all of our executive committee have customers assigned. All of them spend time. I'm talking about the legal team, the finance team, the HR team, everybody, not just sales and marketing, absolutely are required because you need to have empathy for the customer. You need to have a feeling of what's really happened. That's one thing. You need to use the product. We've all been asked to use the product and experience it and demonstrate it in front of, big parts of the company, not just in sales or marketing or product development. Using the product is incredibly important because you learn. And I think this is super, super helpful. But I think one of the things that he talked about, and I want to describe this, Richard, and see if it resonates with you and Thomas, I call it an imaginative understanding of the customer need. They can't always tell you what they need, but if you have an imaginative understanding, if you're swimming around the issue, if you're letting your mind collide with lots of different ideas around how to make this better, and Thomas, you said to solve a problem that's not solved, with an imaginative understanding, that's where magic happens. Because, to Richard's point, the old saying, like, the sort of a car would make you a faster, horse and buggy, because, we can't take things literally. We have to apply, creativity. So, Richard, that's something that really I think about when I hear you talk and what you're describing. I think it's super important.
Thank you, both of you. There is obviously the saying in the Valley, and I think in the community, that you should start with the problem, identifying clearly what the problem statement is, and then try to solve it with the technology that you have available, rather than develop something and then the technology is trying to find a solution or to solve a problem. That's normally not the best way to start. But thanks for the insight. Maybe let me go to the next question. And this is for both. This is for a global company, but also from an entrepreneurial startup point of view. Explain how a global company and a startup company is identifying the customer needs and how the learnings from the customers influence your decision and strategy directions around innovation. And if I can add to that also, how did COVID affected this process and maybe even the outcome?
I have thoughts, Richard. I don't know if you want to go first or you want me to, or
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Identifying their needs with this crazy thing, and it's not top secret, but it's actually, we spend a lot of time talking to them. I say that kind of tongue in cheek because it is just so important. But we do more than that, Thomas. We do crowdsourcing, where you can literally line up, and Richard knows this, we will literally have them prioritize the most important features, functions, additive things that we should do to improve our product. People like Richard, the top people in the development of our company in his prior capacity, would literally prioritize that based on what the customer said. But let me give you an example of something else, and I'm going to come to COVID too. When we do these tours around the world and we talk to customers, and we had our head of products spend time with people, and we analytically take note of all the questions and suggestions. So imagine going to, back when we were traveling pre-pandemic, to Boston, to Frankfurt, to London, to Paris, to Sydney, to, Bangalore, to wherever. And we come back and we understand what they want the most. Great example of that is we did that, and we came back and realized they really like what's happening in Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, e-commerce. And oh my gosh, what they really need is data integration in a much bigger way. We initiated immediately the pursuit of MuleSoft, which was one of our biggest acquisitions ever, and struck immediately to make that happen. And by the way, the really funny part about that was that when people came back and saw numerically, this is all public data, how well we did, people would ask me questions. Wow, like, why are they doing so well? And I said, well, let me paint this picture. We asked the customer what they wanted. They told us very clearly what they wanted. We acted on what they wanted, and it was true that they really wanted it. And I know that's a simple example, but listening and really internalizing and really being willing to risk, in that case, it was nearly $7 billion of capital to go do something that other people didn't see us doing, I think was super, super important. That's one part of it. So crowdsourcing, listening to the customer, organic, inorganic. But the other thing about identifying needs, you asked about in COVID, is willing to understand that speed is different now than it's ever been. And when we understand it, it creates the opportunity for people like on this call to go fast. Because today's environment is going so fast that people that are in Series G, which is venture capital, you started with seed capital from angels, and then A, B, C, D, G, you're getting closer to trying to go public. Series G people who are not even public are being disrupted by Series B people who are not, they're at the beginning of the beginning. The world, the compression of time and the ability to do things, one has to go fast. So you talk about identifying needs, you got to understand, you got to act on it, and you have to deliver it so that you don't deliver something where the world's already changed. The other thing in terms of adapting, the last thing I'll say is during COVID, we watched, what was happening in the world, like everybody, the humanitarian, problem is just, my heart goes out to every single family, every single person in the world that's been impacted by that. And then we stepped away and people started to say, can you help us? We had governments reaching out to us and saying, can you help us? We need to be able to bring people safely in and out of buildings. We need to be able to do different things. We created work.com in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. off a platform. And we did it for, people at request, so they didn't have sticky notes trying to keep people safe. That's Thomas adapting to the moment, meeting the moment with innovation that solves a customer need. Today, when people talk about digital, and we've already established it's just going more and more, you know what happens when people talk about digital now in a lot of places I go in the world? You say, where do you work? Today, I'm perchance at the top of Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, but normally, you know what I say? It's not San Francisco. I work at Slack. It's not 415 Mission Street in San Francisco. I work at Slack. The world and the space and the way things are changing is to meet the moment of today and the future. So Thomas, that's what I would say. Lean in, lead forward, listen, be imaginative, crowdsource. And in the case of Slack, we spent over $27 billion to go meet the moment and a trend that we think is going to be really important in the future. Let me pause, and you and Richard.
It's incredible to hear your insight and your feedback and what Salesforce did in such short period of time in helping out, knowing you have this platform, the reach and the customer base. And I would love Richard to respond with his probably slightly different viewpoint, because it's an interesting topic and a lot of reviews.
Yeah, for sure. I think Mark said a lot of the things I would have said also maybe. So I'm just going to respond to one of the things, which is the power of a platform. And I think this is something that we will see more and more often, which is when you have a single large company that tries to do all of this innovation always by itself. It's very hard for them to move quickly unless they have a platform that actually isn't closed, but it's a platform that allows other people to very quickly build something on top of it. And so some of those ideas also transpired at you.com, where we don't want to build another Google the way Google built something 20 years ago. The internet has changed massively, right? Right now, you have not as many sort of very relevant, very small islands of content, like, oh, this particular hobbyist had something useful that Google 20 years ago indexed, and no one could, you couldn't find anywhere else except in Google. Now you have more and more large content islands. You have all of Reddit, you have all of Quora and Medium, and all these large content islands. And so you need to empower all those different platforms to participate in that entryway, that interface to people's digital life that a search engine can become and is in the case of you.com. And so our sort of meet the moment time is to kind of thinking about unbundling that big monopolistic monolith of Google and actually empowering people to have a choice to say, when I search for something, I want to see more social media or I want to see less social media. I want to see more Reddit, or I hate Reddit and I don't want to see it. Or I want to see this particular news source more often than another. The previous, all previous search engines don't really have that agency, that control in the moment. And so I think it's very important to give that agency back to people, allow them to make their real preferences and feel them and see them right away in the interface. And then on the other side, also be a platform that enables everyone to contribute their own applications to it. And our hope is that eventually we'll be able to move as quickly, and when there's a new need in a few weeks, the community, which in our case is still too small to be just internally, but eventually also the external, will actually be able to contribute an app and meet demands very, very quickly. And that's something that I'm very excited about. That's why we're not just saying building another search engine, but we're building an open search engine platform that can empower others. And this empowerment idea, empowering your customers at Salesforce, in our case, we call them our users, that is something that's very dear to my heart.
Nice, thank you. Maybe quickly to a few other questions, maybe a little bit more tailored towards Germany and the entrepreneurs. First of all, more for Richard and then for both. What needs to be done to have more technical founders in Germany? Personally, I just literally spent 2 weeks traveling, literally 360 around Germany, talking to universities, incubators. I am more hopeful than ever before that what I've seen in the last 20 years. There's so much buzz going on in the entrepreneurial community around AI and beyond, that I hope that this time we can literally pull it off and make it happen. But in general, what needs to be done to have more technical founders in Germany? And what advice you both can give to German entrepreneurs and the AI ecosystem players in general, with all the elements of an ecosystem?
So I think there are a couple of things. So it goes back to some of those 3 points that I mentioned early on, which is that the startup and university ecosystem, and the VC ecosystem and the larger companies. And there are in some cases, I don't like to complain. I just want to like do something about it. So I'm very happy to be part of what the late Chancellery had organized, which is a talk, a lecture series for technical students, students in STEM fields in German universities, to encourage them to think about doing their own startup. In Germany, the majority of the startups are still only started by sort of, I guess there's no equivalent, like the MBA/business school, BWL in German, students. And so I think there's a big opportunity there, because if you have like deep technical insights, hard innovation in chemistry, biology, computer science, AI, and so on, it should be very easy it should be made easier, and maybe the university can also help to foster those types of founders to start their own companies. And then I started investing more in German companies also. I think there's still huge opportunity, and you're right. It is a more hopeful time now than ever to see the startup ecosystem flourish in Germany.
Thank you. Mark,
Yeah,
your personal view, and also maybe what Salesforce does and how people can get connected and how you connect and engage with that ecosystem.
Sure. A couple things. One is, I think Richard, he's done it. He's got the T-shirt, so to speak. He knows how to make it work, and I think his advice is obviously something I take to heart as I'm learning and taking notes here in this session as well. I think, to me, again, what I would say, there's so many bright and capable people, and there's so many well-trained people. I think in many ways, certainly the mindset of risk and getting comfortable with risk that was talked about by Richard. And then I would come back to, if you really want to center and set yourself up for success, make sure you're clear on what it is that's going to drive you to that success. And that's where I think this values drive value, innovation, trust, customer success, it creates a virtuous cycle, a flywheel of momentum that will truly help you. And know that every project is not a success, but out of that project can come success, and to have that mindset. And I think that's been covered, but I would just encourage people to think about that. There's no buddy that has cornered the good ideas market in the world. That's not true. Innovation can come from everywhere. With the beginner's mindset and determination, it can come from everywhere. But I do think there are things that will help support this innovation. And I would call that out to people to be part of that. And, by the way, the pandemic has shown that, digitization is democratizing opportunity in many ways. And I think that venture capital is going to lots of different places. We are putting money, in Europe. We had a $225 million startup fund, a venture fund people can interact with us on, but we're one of many. The world, the paradigm of, if you've got great ideas and you've got something where the problem hasn't been solved and it's scalable and solvable, you might be surprised at your ability to attract capital, but you have to have conviction on what you're doing, and the ability to articulate and inspire and drive forward. So that's what I would say.
Now, if I would be an entrepreneur today in Germany, and I have a problem identified, I'm working on an idea, and I have a seed round, maybe even an A round, I have a beta product of some sort, how would a person get in contact with somebody like Salesforce, like a big corporation? How do I get in, and how do I wiggle my way through the right decision makers, or at a minimum get the visibility to start a conversation? Probably something that Richard at one point did when you guys the company started dating, and then ultimately it ended up into an acquisition.
Well, I'll just throw this out and have Richard, who is attracting capital right now, and I'm just fascinated by his company, and it doesn't surprise me he's doing something big again. But I think at the end of the day, you can do a search on some of the biggest venture capital firms in the world, or local firms. You can find them, and you reach out with a good idea. Their job is to find good ideas. So if you have a compelling idea, and that's an obligation to be prepared and to be compelling and to get there, that's what opens doors. It's a meritocracy of great ideas. And so I would say to that on the venture capital side. On the strategic side, with corporate venture funds, it's the same idea. You put together a compelling opportunity, and you have to evangelize it, you have to sell it, you have to help people understand your vision and the potential and the opportunity, and that attracts capital. That's people's job. That's what they're trying to do. So there's a natural flow, a natural process, and I would just encourage people to pursue that, and to not miss. There are angel environments that you can find. Just ask about. There are private equity that are straddling between venture capital and the reconstruction of existing businesses that sometimes can create tremendous value by reconstructing that older business that needs to be modernized. So I would look at all the different sources of capital and think about how you present yourself and pursue it. But Richard, you've done it, so I think you'll have perhaps even more enlightened response.
Well said, Mark. I think everything you said is again totally spot on. Maybe just to add, yeah, I think it's a mix of the people, like Mark said. You have to have a good, compelling idea, and you have to build some conviction in it by also talking to people and say, would this new solution that you didn't ask for, would it actually solve your problem, right? So talk to your friends, talk to your customers, depending on if you're more B2C, business to consumer, or like B2B, selling into other businesses. And once you get that conviction, it's actually pretty easy, I think, nowadays. You can send me an email. You can see the emails of most big companies and VC firms. They're on LinkedIn. They have websites. You can find them on you.com and many other places. And then just reach out. And there will be some rejection. And this is also something that maybe you have to train. It's almost called like an optimism muscle, because a startup is a roller coaster, right? And like from the outside, of course, no one tells you all the times the roller coaster goes way down. You mostly share the things that when it's going up, but you have to kind of build that conviction and think, realize like that the world could be better off if this thing succeeded, and then try working really hard on it. And then of course there's also since I think we have some VCs here too, it's also up to the VCs to actually reach out to incredible founders and find those opportunities, just like Mark said. And yeah, I guess we're just at the top of the
Excellent.
hour.
Perfect. Thank you. Right on the money. Thank you very much. Logistically speaking, I saw there were a lot of questions in the chat. The way it works right now is Oliver is putting the link to the second Zoom session into the chat right now. So everybody who likes to go into the open Q&A session for networking and asking questions, we will address some of them in the chat. That would be wonderful. So click on the link, get out of this call, and then move into the other. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mark, very much. We in our team are grateful that you spent the time. I think there's a lot of insights, and maybe we, inspired some entrepreneur to take your wisdom and execute to hopefully what prosperous outcome there may be. So with that, I'd like to close this session. I will see you in the other one. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard and Thomas. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
Same here. So everybody look in the chat and then see you in the next session.